Okay, so our topic is on Instagram and self-esteem narcissism. So my article is Let Me Take a Selfie, Associations Between Self-Photography, Narcissism, and Self-Esteem. So this article is about whether the frequency of selfie posts is related to one's narcissistic tendencies or self-esteem. So what does a selfie convey about one's personality, essentially? So what is narcissism and why is it a spectacle? So narcissism is an excessive admiration for oneself and the need to be liked or seen by others. So they are a spectacle to selfie culture because social media provides a great place for narcissists to self-present themselves in front of a large following. They have full control in displaying a positive image. What is self-esteem and why is it a spectacle? Self-esteem is how one perceives themselves. So self-esteem is a spectacle to selfie culture because one feels more comfortable disclosing their appearances behind a screen versus in person, thus resulting a frequency of selfie posts. Editing further creates a more comforting space for one to post more manipulated images of themselves. So there are three types of narcissism that will be a part of the study. The first one being pathological narcissism and non-pathological narcissism, which has two categories, vulnerable and grandiose narcissism. The study and hypothesis. So the study uses a naturalistic observation approach, and they hypothesize that the frequency of selfie posts are positively correlated with the dimensions of narcissism and self-esteem. So the participants who volunteered were a group of undergraduate students that were taking a psychology course at the time. Their ages ranged from 18 to 43, 19 males, and 109 females. The measures that were taken in the study mainly relied on self-reportings, such as pathological narcissism inventory, PNI, narcissistic personality inventory, NPI, and Rosenberg self-esteem scale. So students had to have an already active Instagram account in order for this study to work. The goal was to observe the use of selfies from these students for 30 days. So there were four coders that would record a number of weeks since the participant's first post, B, overall number of photographs since the first post, C, number of photographs posted on 30-day period, D, number of followers each participant had at the beginning of the period, E, overall number of selfies, F, number of selfies within the 30-day period. They also made categories to narrow down what is exactly counted or defined as a selfie, such as pictures of physical appearance, affiliation with friends, event, collage, and other. So the results did not support the hypothesis. The posts classified as selfies and the frequency of them was unrelated to the dimensions of narcissism and self-esteem. However, there were a few positive correlations that were found throughout the study. There was a positive connection between the amount of following with the number of selfies posted. Another positive correlation was found between vulnerable narcissism and physical appearance selfies. Non-pathological narcissism was positively correlated with selfie collages. Physical appearance selfies were positively associated with the subscales of NPI. Selfie collages were negatively associated with contingent self-esteem, but positively correlated with NPI vanity and superiority. So in the discussion, they concluded that selfies are now very common in today's world, so it's difficult to really state what is considered a normal or abnormal amount of selfies to post. So for example, 94.8 of the participants posted selfies. So the selfie is part of today's pop culture, so to define it as a problematic behavior can be quite tricky to do. Again, because social media is a big part of people's lives today, so further research is needed to differentiate these indicators.
Okay, hi. I'm Megan Edwards. The article I did my research on was Let Me Take Another Selfie, Further Examination of the Relation Between Narcissism, Self-Perception, and Instagram Posts. So this article serves as a continuation of the article that Priscilla just presented. So it was done within a few years later, and it's a continuation of Barry and his colleagues' previous research and experimentation, the correlation between social media, specifically Instagram, its usage, and narcissism. The scope of the study was widened to consider more. It was intended to replicate and expand the previous study done on posts, this one on posts other than selfies and self perceptions other than narcissism and self esteem. This particular study also considered things like physical appearance concerns and fear of missing out, which is labeled as FOMO, in addition to narcissism and self esteem and the effects that posting on Instagram had on them all. The research was done with 100 participants, they which was narrowed down from 110 undergraduate students. This included 20 females and 80 males, all ranging from the age of 18 to 25. The final participants that were included in this study included 77, which identified as white Caucasian, 13 that identified as Asian, 11 identified as Black or African American, 5 identified as American Indian or Alaskan Native, 3 identified as Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander, and then 1 did not provide information. There were 7 hypotheses in total created prior to the research team, along with 3 additional questions that were established to create a better understanding of all aspects of this platform and its usage. Overall, all hypotheses related to the key ideas of narcissism, self-esteem, FOMO, and concerns about physical appearance, all in relation to different types of Instagram posts. The coding that was used for this research was that participants' Instagram activity was observed and recorded for 30 days. Each post within those 30 days was recorded as either a selfie, a non-selfie photo of the participants, an image that did not include the participants. And then for the last 2 categories, they were broken down into themes of physical appearance, affiliation with others, events, activities, location, accomplishments, collages, or other undifferentiated. The measures for the study relied on the self-reporting based on the results of the questionnaires that the participants took. Those questionnaires included the Pathological Narcissism Inventory, Narcissistic Personality Inventory, Rosenberg Self-Esteem Scale, Physical Appearance Comprehension Scale, Sociocultural Attitudes Towards Appearance Scale, and then Fear of Missing Out Survey. The results came within like 4 kind of categories. There's a correlation among types of Instagram posts, which the research showed that posting an overall greater amount of selfies and poses was not related to self-esteem, preoccupation with physical appearance, or FOMO. There was correlation between selfies and themes, correlation between poses and self-reported variables, which the results based on these results, the researchers believe that affiliation poses were positively correlation with vulnerable narcissism. Event, activity, accomplishment poses were related to non-pathological narcissism, and posy collages were negatively correlated with non-pathological narcissism. And then there was moderation analysis and correlations between other parameters of Instagram use, which included the proportion of poses was significantly correlated with a participant's number of followers, with having a private account, and with the number of likes they received per self-image post. And then the conclusion from all this research was that the overall findings of the research found that social media posts of one's own image, whether taken by themselves or by someone else, was not directly related or associated with narcissism or any other form of self-perception. The findings did, however, lead to some speculations regarding the connection between the showcasing of one's activities and accomplishments and certain aspects of narcissism. These results came as kind of a shock. They were despite the assumptions and suppositions made by many.
Okay, my name's Lauren Miller. My article was called Exploring the Relationship Between Frequency of Instagram Use, Exposure to Idealized Image, and the Psychological Well-Being in Women. So the purpose of the study was to show that excessive social comparisons have a negative effect on the well-being of women. It centers around the social comparison theory, which is a belief that individuals have an internal drive to gain accurate self-evaluations. So there's upward and downward social comparisons. Upward is when people compare themselves to seemingly superior people, versus downwards, which is comparing themselves to people that they believe are inferior to them. Um, this shows that social media is used as a way of determining social and personal worth because there are usually negative outcomes as everyone is showing their ideal selves on social media. My particular article focuses on Instagram because the visual content leads to excessive social comparisons, and it also has a lot of negative body image trends while you're on the app. In terms of the participant information, there were 129 women, and the study chose to focus on women because women make up the majority of the Instagram user base, and they tend to make more social comparisons than men. The age range was between 18 and 35. The participants were mostly taken from the undergrad psychology participant pool or volunteers from around campus, so most of the volunteers would have been college students. So for part one, it focused around a questionnaire that measured different aspects of mental health and self-perceptions. It specifically talked about depressive symptoms. It measured self-esteem across performance, social interaction, and appearance. It measured anxiety and body image anxiety, as well as concern about physical appearance and how often people compare themselves to others. The questionnaire also asked how often they use Instagram and how many followers and following they had. The hypothesis for this part was that time spent on Instagram would correlate positively with depression, physical anxiety, social comparisons, and body dissatisfaction, and correlate negatively with self-esteem. The second part of the study first exposed the participants to images of beauty, fitness, or travel on Instagram. And then they took the same questionnaire as part one, and the goal was to see how their scores might have differed depending on whether they saw the images or not. So the images that they were shown were of people wearing makeup and looking perfect, as the fitness images showed women in workout apparel and exercising. And then the travel images focused on iconic landmarks. There were no faces shown in these pictures because they were acting as a comparison between the beauty and fitness and just the landmarks. And then, of course, after that, they were shown the questionnaires, and it was meant to see if they would have any changes. The hypothesis for this part was that exposures to images that invite upward social comparison, such as the fitness and beauty images, decrease appearance self-esteem and self-related physical attractiveness, and it increases physical appearance anxiety. So the results of part one did match the hypothesis. The average time on Instagram correlated positively with depressive symptoms, trait anxiety, social comparison, orientation, physical appearance anxiety, and body image disturbance, and it correlated negatively with self-esteem. The study also showed that the number of followers and following had the same results. So if you had more followers, that would correlate positively with the depressive symptoms and the body image disturbances, and negatively with self-esteem. For part two, it did not match their hypothesis because there was not a significant change on self-esteem, appearance anxiety, or generalized anxiety. But there was a change on the self-rated attractiveness scores. So those who were shown the images of beauty and fitness decreased in self-rated attractiveness scores. The conclusion that was found from this study is that Instagram is linked to a range of social trends, such as beauty and fitness, that can lead to negative body image outcomes more than other social media platforms. It also showed that the image-based platform shows idealized images, causing higher risk of negative outcomes. There were issues with the body image, but also a fear of missing out, especially when shown pictures of other people on vacation.
Hi, my name is Marta Vasquez, and my article is called Get Out of My Selfie, Narcissism, Gender, and Motives for Self-Photography Among Emerging Adults. So this article discusses the rising popularity in smartphones and how it has made it easier for self-photography. The increase in facilitation in selfie taking has raised the question of narcissism as a possible personality trait. A direct quote from the article is, individuals with higher narcissism have poor impulse control, tend to exploit others, and have an excessive need for admiration. People that have narcissistic behavior feel a sense of entitlement, the need to be respected, and often manipulate others. So, to what degree are people being narcissistic when taking selfies? So, it discusses the links between narcissism and selfie taking and how it can be more or less depending on whether or not the selfie is taken alone or with others, as well as the likelihood of women taking selfies versus men. So the participants were a total of 276 emerging adults. They were all from the same universities. A total of 218 of these participants were female, and the ages range from 17 to 29. There was an 26.4% of freshmen, 25% sophomores, 28.3 juniors, and 19.9 seniors at the university. And the ethnic distribution was 69.9 Caucasian, 14.1 Hispanic or Latino, 6.9 Black, 5.8 multicultural, and 2.9 Asian or Pacific West Islander. So the materials and procedures. So participants were recruited through handouts on campus, which then directed them to an online platform called SurveyMonkey, in which they would answer survey questions. And within that survey, there was a measure of narcissism using the Narcissistic Personality Inventory 13. So participants answered questions in regards to their selfie taking habits, such as the number of solo selfies taken in the past week, taken in the past week with others, as well as what motivates them to post selfies on social media. So the results for the first part highly depend on the scores based on the NPI scale. So the NPI actually measures three distinct facets of narcissism. So there's leadership, authority, grandiose exhibitionism, and exploitative entitlement. There were significant correlations between the GE narcissistic measure, and as you can see to the left on the diagram, we can see that women take more selfies with others than men do, and men take equally or around the same amount of selfies alone than women. So the results for part 2 are based on the social media aspect. So why do people upload selfies to their social media? So the table above mentions different categories, such as narcissistic, sharing and connecting, functional use, self-esteem boosting, memory, and conformity. So the highest proportion of responses was towards narcissistic tendencies with a 29.53%. So the most common reason as to why individuals post selfies on social media relates to the narcissistic tendencies, such as wanting to share how good they look and wanting praise and feedback from others. Men tend to use the excuse of selfies being for functional use, such as being sponsored fitness athletes or it being a job, but actually root in these tendencies, while women attempt to appeal to their audience the most by reflecting their femininity. So these type of posts generate a more positive response. So in conclusion, both men and women with the grandiose exhibitionism facet are linked to having narcissistic tendencies. Individuals take selfies for their own personal enjoyment, and those with narcissistic tendencies post on social media in an effort to gain praise. Therefore, the grand conclusion is how well a post does affects individuals' self-esteem.
Hi, my name is Eileen Garcia, and my article is called Self-Absorbed and Socially Engaged Narcissistic Traits and Social Networking Use. So, as technology advances and social media becomes bigger, it is important to examine the changes these platforms have on our personality and mental well being. Although the idea of it may seem harmless, its constant use has raised some concern. Its use has led to some developing mental issues, including low self esteem, eating disorders, and social comparisons. On the opposite end of the spectrum, some have even suggested that these sites may even be appealing to those with higher levels of narcissism. This is due to the fact that social media provides a platform for users to promote themselves, have others praise them. This is the type of enforcement narcissists seek, which is why it's important to find out if there's an actual link, which is why the goal is to find out which type of narcissism has a larger correlation with media use. So why is this important? People may begin to exhibit narcissistic behaviors in real life as a result of their social media usage. This can leave a strain on relationships and further develop into other personality disorders. So there are three different types of narcissism. The first one being grandiosity slash agenic extroversion. And this refers to the belief that somebody feels as though they are better than most people. This is the one that most people think of when they think of narcissism. These people tend to criticize others while making their accomplishments seem superior. Entitlement slash self-centered antagonism refers to when a person believes they deserve something even though they haven't done anything to get it. And these people are like the middle of the narcissistic spectrum. uh, and the third one is vulnerability slash narcissistic neuroticism. And this refers to those that have sensitive egos that are fragile to their image and criticism. They try to keep a certain image and prove something of themselves. Um, and the different types of social media use include passive, which is just like scrolling through and like liking things, and active is posting your status or posting a picture of yourself or tweeting. And the third kind is like comparison. So you compare yourself to other people. So the study focused on how different types of narcissism are affected by Facebook usage. And it followed a group of people from the third grade all the way to the age of 22. So it was a long-term study. And it was a group in a suburban community. The ages range from 9 all the way to 22. There were a total of 134 participants, 74 of which were women, 60 were men, 70 were white, 29 were black, 26 were Hispanic, 5 were Asian, and then 4 was a different group. For the hypothesis, it stated that those that exhibited characteristics of agenic extroversion will have heightened levels of active social media use with low passive use. They will also be experiencing more downward social comparison with less upward social comparison. They will be experiencing less exclusion as well. And then for those with vulnerability slash narcissistic neuroticism, they will have heightened levels of passive use with lower levels of active use. They will experience more jealousy as well. They will be experiencing more upward social comparison and less downward social comparison. Those with entitlement slash narcissistic neuroticism will be experiencing heightened upward comparison and less downward comparison. They will also feel more social exclusion. So for the method, the first one was narcissism. So this is measured using the narcissistic admiration and rivalry questionnaire, as well as the brief pathological narcissism inventory. The NARQ measured admiration and rivalry, and this indicated narcissism. And the way they measured this was from a scale of 1 to 6, and people would answer the questions. And then the BPNI measured and assessed vulnerability and manipulation. This is also on a 1 to 6 scale, with 6 being completely agree and then 1 being not at all. And the active and Facebook use slash active slash passive Facebook use. So they use the multi-dimensional scale of Facebook use to measure active slash passive use. Active use is measured by questions like how often do you post a message on your own Facebook timeline? How often do you post a picture of yourself on Facebook? Passive use is measured by questions like how often do you visit a friend's profile on Facebook? How often do you visit a Facebook profile of someone that does not belong to your Facebook network. And it would range from a scale of 1 to 7, with 7 being several times a day and 1 being never. And there were also the upward/downward social comparisons, with participants being asked, how often do you look at Facebook and compare your experiences to other people? How often does this make you feel bad about yourself? And it was on a scale of 1 to 8 as well, and it was reverse coded. Exclusion was also a measure. So participants were asked, how often do you look at Facebook and feel hurt or left out by seeing friends doing things without you? And this was also on a scale of 1 to 8, and it was reverse coded as well. So for the results, grandiosity/agenic extroversion was moderately positively correlated with active use. Vulnerability/narcissistic neuroticism was moderately positively correlated with passive use. All types of narcissism were moderately positively correlated with downward comparison, and they were more likely to have downward social comparison. They were typically like all three were the same level of correlation. Entitlement and self-centered antagonism and vulnerability / narcissistic neuroticism had moderate to strong positive correlations with upward comparison. So for the study's hypothesis, it was correct, as agenic extroversion was positively correlated with active use. The results supported the hypothesis, as well as it turned out that vulnerability / narcissistic neuroticism was also positively correlated with passive use. The hypothesis was also proven invalid, as all types of narcissism were positively correlated with downward comparison, including vulnerability and entitlement. The hypothesis was supported by the results, as entitlement and vulnerability ended up being positively correlated to upward comparison.
Hi, my name is Deja Williams, and my article is Self-Expression on Social Media. Do tweets present accurate and positive portraits of impulsivity, self-esteem, and attachment style? So the purpose of the study was to basically analyze whether people portray themselves in a positive and accurate manner. People are relying heavily on social media to express themselves. This study specifically focuses on the usage of Twitter to accurately portray their true selves and analyze how they are being perceived. Self-expression and individuality is growing among young cohorts due to the rise of social media. And according to the studies, there are roughly 288 million people active on Twitter. And Twitter is estimating on average of 500 million messages per day. So basically, Twitter is a message-based platform that allows people to express their feelings, thoughts, and interests without relying on images. And the typical age range for Twitter is anywhere from 18 to 29. And the average within this age range is 37% active on Twitter. Also, 19% of the adult population is active on Twitter currently. So in this study, there was 128 users, which are going to be referred to as targets. And they had to complete a 105 item battery of personality tests and provide 10 most recent tweets, not including retweets. And there was trait measures that were chosen to analyze self-esteem, perspectives of interpersonal relationships, impulsivity, and attachment styles. There also was 11 perceivers who read the tweets and rated the targets on their 105 item scale. Out of these targets, there was 37 male and 91 female, which all averaged around being on Twitter for 2 years or more. And all the targets and perceivers were undergraduates from the same university. As you can see in the results, there was higher levels of normativity than there was in distinctive accuracy within all the subcategories. So overall, Twitter widely represents self-expression. And according to the result, people are more likely to be perceived for their accurate selves, or at least aligned with their views. It was also found that though impulsivity and self-esteem can be detected in tweets. It tends to be lower than other interactions on other platforms and in face-to-face interactions.
Okay, so one of the conclusions that we came to after researching was that Instagram and Twitter, or photo-based versus text-based social media, affect people in different ways. Instagram or photo-based social media allow people to more actively compare themselves with others, and text-based social media allows people to hide behind anonymity, and therefore not compare themselves as much to other people.
So for a second conclusion, it stated that all of our articles see that there is some connection between social media and self-esteem. When we use social media, we have the habit of comparing ourselves with other people, and this can include their lifestyle, money, their body, success, etc. And this can lower our self-esteem as we are comparing ourselves to others.
Based on the research that we did, we also came to the conclusion that the amount of followers can indicate a connection between narcissism and self-esteem. Some research shows a correct connection between the two and how it can be affected by the levels of both narcissism and self-esteem. For instance, there is one that found that the number of followers was strengthened in the presence of narcissism and with higher levels of narcissism.
And after doing further research, we found that people with high self-esteem use social media for self-display as a way to create a more positive image of themselves, and people with low self-esteem use social media as a way to express themselves in a safer environment rather than face-to-face.
We also concluded that aspects of social media can create a rift between narcissism and how it can affect self-esteem, such as the amount of feedback an individual can get from a post in regards to likes and comments.
Overall, picture-based social media tends to cause lower self-esteem due to the constant comparison of oneself to perfect people. And it also provides a place for narcissistic tendencies to form. While message-based social media has proved to have more positive output due to higher activity of self-expression.